They are hobbits bound in a common unique trait. They were among the few in Middle-earth to have possessed the One Ring. While we find that the ring affected them similarly, it would seemingly impact one far more than the others. Today on Nerd of the Rings, we cover why Gollum doesn't age like Bilbo after losing the One Ring. As we know, the One Ring has a unique effect on the mortals who possess it. With Bilbo, and later with Frodo, we see that they appear to not age while they have ownership of the ring. And presumably with Sméagol, this would have been the same, for a time. Bilbo possesses the ring for just over 60 years, and from the age of 50 to 111, he barely appears to age. However, he has begun to feel thin, stretched, like butter that has been scraped over too much bread. Gollum would experience this in the extreme. He would come to possess the ring on what is likely his 33rd birthday in 2463 of the Third Age. He would possess his precious for the following 478 years, stretched far beyond the lifespan of a hobbit. But here we arrive at the main question of today's topic. After that fateful day in 2941, when ownership passed from Gollum to Bilbo, why didn't Gollum appear to age? In total, he would be without the ring for nearly 78 years. Why is there no perceivable difference in his appearance and mobility between his description in The Hobbit and that of The Lord of the Rings? First, we should acknowledge that the manner in which a ring-bearer's possession of the One Ring begins and ends makes a tremendous difference. As Gandalf points out in his conversation with Frodo, Bilbo began his possession of the ring with an act of pity, sparing Gollum's life. Because of this, Gandalf says, Bilbo was ultimately able to give up the ring voluntarily, albeit with Gandalf's help. Contrast this with Gollum. Sméagol murdered Déagol in order to take possession of the ring by force, and the ring was not given up by him, but had indeed abandoned him. Looking at these two characters, one continues to be ensnared by the ring long after losing it. The other, while perhaps not totally being free from the ring, is able to move on quite happily with the remainder of his life. Now, before we dive even deeper into this explanation, it's worth noting that there are some misconceptions that derive from the film adaptations. One is the omission of a 17-year gap between Bilbo giving up the ring and Frodo meeting Bilbo in Rivendell. Indeed, this is how we know that Frodo also seemed to be well preserved to the hobbits of the Shire. In the films, this understandably appears to be shortened to perhaps a matter of weeks or months. In this light, it would make sense that if Bilbo had aged 17 years from his giving up the ring, he would appear as a 67-year-old hobbit. However, when we take a closer look at the text, there's nothing to indicate Bilbo had greatly aged in the 17 years since leaving the Shire. Interestingly enough, Frodo meets Bilbo in the Hall of Fire, at the Council of Elrond, and when Bilbo gifts him Sting and the Mithril shirt. And in none of these instances does Frodo or the narrator make any remarks about Bilbo seeming older. Surely if Bilbo had aged significantly, Frodo would be the first to notice. Indeed, Bilbo himself, who is now 128 years old, indicates that it's mostly because he is not allowed, not because he's too old, that he hasn't returned to the Shire. I have thought several times of going back to Hobbiton for it, but I am getting old, and they would not let me. Gandalf and Elrond, I mean. They seemed to think that the enemy was looking high and low for me, and would make mincemeat of me if he caught me tottering about in the wild. While he admits he's getting old, it doesn't appear that's the main reason he hasn't left. That's on Gandalf and Elrond. Like Gollum himself, it appears that Bilbo could indeed still be experiencing residual effects of the One Ring, perhaps aging little, if at all. As for Gollum, he did possess the ring much, much longer, and it obviously still has a hold on his mind. Now, another theory is that because Gollum had the ring longer, it would take longer for him to age and die. But we cannot discount this idea that the ring could continue to affect those who long held it. Aside from Gollum and Bilbo with the One Ring, we can also look at the effects of the Nine. The ring wraiths no doubt had their rings for a significant time, first turning them into great sorcerers and rulers among men, then stretching them beyond their mortal means, becoming wraiths. Yet when we finally meet the Nazgul, they do not possess their own rings. As Gandalf states,
"So it is now. The 9 he has gathered to himself, the 7 also, or else they are destroyed."
Further, in Unfinished Tales, it says the ring wraiths were entirely enslaved to their 9 rings, which Sauron now held. Even without their rings of power, the Nazgul are still enslaved to and affected by them. No doubt this could also be so with the One. But of course, the ring's power would indeed be broken when it is destroyed on March 25th, 3019. While in Gondor after the victory, Frodo says he wishes to go to Rivendell to see Bilbo, for he was grieved that Bilbo was not among the household of Elrond who came to Minas Tirith. Arwen then answers, "You know the power of that thing which is now destroyed, and all that was done by that power is now passing away. But your kinsman possessed this thing longer than you. He is ancient in years now, according to his kind, and he awaits you, for he will not again make any long journey, save one." So while age would not have caught up to Bilbo after giving up the ring, as it does in the films, it would after the ring's destruction. When the hobbits and Gandalf finally come to Rivendell the day before Frodo and Bilbo's birthday, they see how much he has changed since they last saw him less than a year ago. First of all, before they had eaten or washed or even shed their cloaks, the hobbits went in search of Bilbo. They found him all alone in his little room. It was littered with papers and pens and pencils. But Bilbo was sitting in a chair before a small bright fire. He looked very old, but peaceful and sleepy. Notice it is here, less than 9 months after last seeing Bilbo, that the hobbits notice he looks very old, not after the previous 17-year gap. The following day, at a celebration of Bilbo's birthday in Rivendell, they find that Bilbo often fell asleep during their tale of their journeys. Indeed, it is said that in these days, he spent most of his time in his room, except for meals. Frodo would next see Bilbo 2 years later, when they meet at the Grey Havens. Bilbo would ride on a small gray pony, seeming to nod in his sleep. Then Bilbo woke up and opened his eyes.
"Hello, Frodo," he said. "Well, I have passed the old Took today, so that's settled. And now I think I'm quite ready to go on another journey."
Both Bilbo and Frodo, free of the One Ring, would live out their mortal days on Tol Eressëa in the Blessed Realm. While Gollum would perish with his precious, there can be little doubt as to what would have happened if he had survived. We see that age quickly catches up to Bilbo over a matter of months, yet he holds on for at least a couple more years, enough to pass the old Took. For Gollum, who had long surpassed any possible lifespan of a hobbit, his days would likely have been quite short. In the end, all the bearers of the One would be free of it, whether perishing at its side or sailing far beyond the reach of the mortal world to a swift sunrise. As always, I want to say a huge thank you to all my Patreon and YouTube supporters who make this channel possible. Tom DeBombadil19, Lissamy the Cinda, Rabbi Rob Thomas, Charles Leisure, CCDC Red Team, Joe Tepper, The Mighty Mim, Andrew Carlisle, Swirled Traveler, Matthew Jeffrey, Viking Lord, Alvin Einbert, Jeremy Daniel Derby, Leo Vittori, Sky Carcass, Slide Belts, Dane Ragnarsson, Berto Berg, Graham Derricott, The Dark-Haired One, Wyland, Micah Wu, and Debbie. If you enjoyed the artwork in this video, check out the artists in the description to purchase prints of their great work for yourself. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.